Yes or no is what you may type in the comments below after you watch this sales pitch to buy a commander deck that not only inspires fear based on its art, but also in the way it plays. In this video, you are going to be sold on purchasing a Captain Negathrod Horror Tribal commander deck. The commander for this deck is Captain Negathrod. He reads, horrors you control have menace. Whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. At the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in your opponent's graveyard that's put there from their library this turn, put it onto the battlefield under your control. Now, when people generally play this commander deck, what I've seen is that people cast spells that cause people to mill half of their library in one turn. And for new players, to mill is to take a card from the top of your library and to immediately put it into your graveyard. Now, a person can totally build this deck by doing things like that and getting creatures and artifacts from your opponents, but those decks, in my experience, often rarely win games. So for this specific deck, we just want to focus on the fact that our horrors are going to gain menace and that our horrors are going to deal damage to our opponents, which is going to reduce their life total, which is going to quicken the pace of the game and you winning the game, and that's also going to cause them to mill that many cards. So when you're building this deck, always remember, play more creatures than cards that just cause mill. Sun Tzu, Art of War. And when we're playing these decks, we generally want to have around 35 to 36 creatures inside this deck. Because look, we're going to use Consuming Aberration as the example for this video. Consuming Aberration reads, their power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. Whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of their library into the reveal land card, then puts those cards into their graveyard. I've seen Consuming Aberration be a 50-50 at times in games. Now, I would imagine that having a Consuming Aberration would be a problem on the battlefield. Now, what if I made a copy of the Consuming Aberration? What if I made 5 copies of the Consuming Aberration? Keeping in mind that every single copy of the Consuming Aberration with Captain Negathrod in play have menace, and as they deal damage, causes your opponents to mill that many cards. So a minor sub-theme of this deck is to play cards that allow us to make token copies of all of the horrors that we already have on the battlefield. So the biggest strength of this commander deck is its ability to apply pressure to your opponents. And once you have around 3 or 4 creatures on the board constantly dealing damage to your opponents, it puts your opponents in a place where any of the board wipes that they could use to destroy your creatures or any of the removal spells that they could have to stop what you're doing, they are now milling and losing the opportunity to draw. Keeping in mind that because we are in the color blue, if your opponent does happen to randomly draw into that one board wipe that's going to destroy your board, you could always just counter that spell with a counter spell. Now, for me, this is the one counter spell I have inside this deck because I found that it was so oppressive that it just led to a poor game experience for my friends. So I only play one counter spell. But if you want this deck to be really intense, you play around 5 to 6 to 7 counter spells inside this deck alongside everything I just mentioned previously. And this deck has the potential to become something that I like to call an archenemy commander deck. A commander deck that can be so strong that all 3 of your opponents have to team up to remove you from the game before they have the opportunity to play against each other. Now, because Magic the Gathering players tend to be smart, the second time you play against your friends with this commander deck, the moment you cast any horror, they're immediately just going to start casting removal on these creatures. And that's fine. That's just going to be a part of the game. What I'm going to say though is that you always want to hold up a counter spell as you cast Captain Negathrod. Remember, never cast Captain Negathrod without having a counterspell in your hand. Sun Tzu, Art of War. So if you made it this far in the video, we're just going to take a quick look at the deck list over here. The deck runs to about 123.98, with the most expensive cards in the deck being this Phyrexian Obliterator at $10.99. We also have a Mind Crank here for $18.99, and also this Court of Cunning, surprisingly enough, at $8.99. Keep in mind, everybody, that this deck originally comes inside of a precon, so you can get your hands on this deck for relatively cheap. The only thing that I recommend you go out and buy are the cards that create token copies of creatures. If you have any in your collection, I would recommend that you add those cards to this deck. I would also recommend that you go out and you have to purchase a copy of Reflections of Litjara, because this creates a copy of your horrors as you cast them. I'm also going to recommend that you go out and purchase a copy of Court of Cunning, because Court of Cunning creates kind of a conundrum for your opponents, where your opponent's creature total, because they're going to be milling, is going to be low, so they're already not going to have a lot of creatures that are going to be able to deal damage to you to take the Monarch away from you, which is going to cause you to draw 2 cards every single turn. And also keep in mind that Captain Negathrod, everybody, is a 3/6. So he's really good at blocking your opponent's creatures that are trying to deal damage to you. So just type yes or no in the comments below to tell me whether I convince you to buy this deck or not. If you all want to see more videos like this, just like this video and subscribe to the channel. And also keep in mind that we do have a Discord community as well, where we talk about building Commander decks, and sometimes we meet up in real life to play games of Commander. We're also going to be hosting Commander tournaments in the New York, New Jersey area, so you have to be a part of the Discord to be notified when we are having those events, okay? Always remember, everybody, eat healthy, okay? Work out every single day, and most importantly, you guys remember to believe in yourself, all right? Peace out, people.